Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. There's more to life for Black boys than sports. Probably not the most popular statement right now, at a time when the Washington Commanders team is riding really, really high. But for every Black professional football player, professional basketball player, professional baseball player living out their sports dream, there are countless others who are not. Well, my guest tonight is Martellus Bennett, a Super Bowl champion who played in the NFL for more than a decade. And we're discussing his book titled Dear Black Boy. He says the book is a letter of encouragement to all boys of color who feel sports may be their only choice. Martellus, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. That was a great intro.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And if you like that, buckle up. Let's share a couple of fast facts. In 2023, 70% of NBA players and slightly more than 70% of NFL players were Black, but only 8 out of every 10,000 high school football players are drafted into the NFL, and less than 2% of college football or basketball players go on to play in the NFL or the NBA. When you hear about those numbers, why do you think sports, particularly basketball, and in your case, the NFL, remains such a big dream for so many Black boys?
I think one period of time you got to think in history, like so let's say the Renaissance period, right? For a Black man, the sexiest thing was to be educated, right? The poets, the writers, the jazz musicians, right? That was the emphasis in our media and what our conversation was, right? And the athlete was in the mix of it. One didn't outweigh the other. Like it was like but the athletes were very impactful people. You had the Alis, you had the Jim Browns, you had like these men who represented a community and like they stood for something in this space, right? And at that time, like if a woman was looking around, you'd be like, hey man, that's the poets right there. Hey, you need to go talk to hey, that brother can read and write, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that was like the most beautiful thing. And then as far as when marketing started to grow, it was easier to sell sports to the community, right? If we selling sports and we're going through sports and things like that, then that becomes the thing that we see the most. It became the sexiest thing, right? The Black body was once again at the forefront of what was possible. But the blueprint for becoming an athlete is one that we all can recognize. Like if I look at what it becomes to make it to the NBA, it takes this to this to this to this. I have a chance. To go to the NFL, it takes this to this to this. I have a chance. And this is how you do it, right? We have countless examples of how to do it. So you kind of feel like you're more in control of your future as an athlete if you are willing to do the work. The problem is when that future gets slimmer when it's the amount of people which are attempting to achieve the same thing, right? So it's not as easy as it seems. And it's a lot of people who you can recognize they come from where you come from. If it's a rags to riches story, right? You be from the community in which you grew. Like this guy was from my neighborhood. One of us made it. It's possible for me too. While the blueprint for making it to NASA, when it comes to someone that look like you, that one's not as deeply rooted in blue. It's an overlay. So it's like, how do you do it? You have to navigate this space, and not only do you have to navigate this space, but not how many people around you can help you navigate through that space.
You grew up. You were born in San Diego.
Yeah.
And for cities of comparable size, San Diego is a wealthy city.
It is.
And yet in the NBA, I'm sure you met, other players who were born in microscopically small towns, Black players who did not have the opportunity to see or be exposed to the kinds of things that you were exposed to growing up in San Diego, California. Um, so with all of those advantages to just see what you saw in San Diego, why did you become a football player?
So I actually grew up. I was born in San Diego, but I actually grew up in Houston. So I'm a
Okay,
Navy. My dad
big
served.
city.
Yeah, my dad served in the Navy, and I was born on a Navy ship. And then but most of my childhood was in Houston. But I would
Okay.
say that I don't think that this idea of when you think about seeing, like, what does that mean, right? Like, there's ways in which you can see the world through books, and ways you can surf the internet and see the world, and you can see all these possibilities. Is different. I think I think the biggest thing for me in my childhood, as far as like choosing to be say why did I play football, would be football wasn't my number one dream. Right? Like I've never as a kid did I say I was going to go to the NFL. I always thought I was going to work at NASA. I'm from Houston, so NASA to me was the biggest thing. Here, astronauts were cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was technology. It was space. My dad worked at Enron, so to me, like, technology was the big thing as a kid. Now I played sports because I love to play sports and I love to compete. But I didn't even grow up. I don't have a favorite team, right? Like, I didn't grow up with a favorite team. My favorite player in any sport wasn't even because of the way that he plays his sport. It was Shaquille O'Neal, because of all the things that he did while playing the sport.
Mm-hmm.
My idea of what an athlete wasn't somebody who only performed on the court. You had to be an actor, you had to be a musician, you had to be able to be funny, you had to be able to do all these things, because Shaq was like what I thought the best athlete would be. So growing up, I thought I had to be multiple things like Shaq, right, in order to be that superstar level of a person, to player, make products, do all these things. And he's in every commercial, still in every commercial. Like, he's still doing the same thing today, and so am I, right? Like, in a lot of ways like that. So I think that, like, for me to play the sport, it was a gateway, right, to possibilities. Like, I could go to college. I went to college. When I went to college, I wasn't even going to go to college. I was in the NBA draft in high school. So I was working out for the NBA while in high school, but then my mom wanted me to go to college. So then I went to college. I was going to play both sports. I went to A&M because my brother was at A&M. I mean, my brother were roommates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of my college career. And then, so I played football. I wasn't even going to play football in college. I was only going to play basketball, but my brother was there, and I was like, oh, and I was on a football scholarship playing both sports. But since I was in the NBA draft, I told my mom I would go to college for at least 1 year. So I was only planning on playing basketball for a year in college, and then going back to the NBA draft. But then, how many chances do you get to play with your brother in college? It was a really cool thing. And I thought I was going to be able to do both, like I was doing in high school. But then football started taking up more time than it did in high school, playing basketball on the side in class and all that stuff. And,
When you think about this book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this book was first published in 2019. So why now are you reinvigorating this issue?
well, I think if this book right here, I think that's the thing. I don't really see it as an issue anymore. I think when at that time when I first illustrated the book, is a totally different time period for us as Black boys. Alton Sterling had just been murdered, and the
Yeah.
future, the ideas of, like, the first book was even darker in tone and in color. Like, the language was a little bit darker. But
How
as
so?
I mean, it was more written in a tone of, it was more hopeful. Like, it was hoping. The new one is more matter of fact. This is how we do it. So, like, what I was hoping for, or I went out, and as I live life, I discovered how we can get what I was hoping for. So this is why I re-illustrated it and it's reimagined, because it's like some of this stuff I still believe in, but now it's an extra 30 pages of work in there of new things that I discovered along my journey. So it's almost like I wrote this letter to you as a young Black boy, and then 5 years later, after all my adventures, I come back and update you on the things I discovered this time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why I wanted to rewrite the book, because I actually feel like, this the tools that Black boys need is much different from what I used to think it was. Right now, I think they just actually need more introductions to possibilities, more conversations about possibilities, and more in, like you say, what you say, the vision, the sight to see all these things. How can I go somewhere, extract this information and bring it back and give it to you, instead of extracting information out of our neighborhood and going to give it to everybody else? How can I take infrastructure or information from all over the world and hand it to you and be like, hey, I discover new things. This is what I learned. Oh, okay. Another year, I go back, I live life. Here's some new things I discover. I write you another letter. So it's like this updated communication in which I can now inform them like different ways, because a lot of things I was hopeful for have happened. I have discovered, I have done these things. I know that it'll be true. Like I am them, they am me. So I would want to be updated, right? Like that's how this book came around for the second time.
You know, earlier this week, Craig Melvin became the new co-anchor of the Today Show, a Black man who has a long resume as a journalist and TV anchor. And when they were having the celebrations for him, he made a comment. He said that without his parents allowing him to see it, he could not be it. And do you believe that in the context of your book, that there is a lot of noise that prevents Black boys in 2025 from seeing whatever it is, so that they are unable to be it?
Yeah, I think a part of it, I think that is it all depends on what we emphasize as a culture. What we put emphasis on, what we give psychic energy to and pay attention to, it becomes louder. So if we are paying attention to this as a collective, then whatever that is, it becomes louder. So they're going to automatically see more of that, right? So the thing is, it's not just for them, it's what everybody's paying attention to, right? As a community, as a people, right? What are we highlighting and what are we celebrating and what are we discussing in public discourse, right? So when I think about a youth, they only can really get what trickles down to them as far as information goes. And that information is deciphered through the things that we pay the most attention to. That's the conversation they hear behind them. That's the things that they see on the TV. That's the things that they see you reading or things that you are talking about. That's how that information is cycled, or the things that's been told to them in music, where a lot of times we'll consume our information from music. But now music has changed and the message in the music has changed, right? So now the messages that they're receiving aren't the same messages of empowerment that you may have received from KRS-One or Public Enemy or what they were talking about. So their news and the story and the media that they have that's broadcasted is what needs to change, so that they can know that there's other things to pay attention to, right? Like, can we emphasize, like, there's more credit or more conversation around someone writing a song than there is someone writing a book, right? Both is genius, but we give more emphasis to one than the other. And I think that's what we decide as a people, not just us, but what white media puts on television, what Black media puts on television, what we share, what we pay attention to is always going to be amplified. And that is going to shape what the children see and how they think about the future of the world.
I have so many more questions for you, and this conversation is only just beginning, but hold tight. We are going to take a brief break. And don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation tonight with Martellus Bennett, a Super Bowl champion who played in the NFL for more than a decade. We're discussing his book titled Dear Black Boy. You know, earlier you mentioned something, and I was particularly struck by it. You said your mother wanted you to go to college, and of course you did. I remember back in the old days, and I think I was, particularly, blessed by this second generation HBCU grad. But my parents, the discussion that I remember as a child with coming from my parents and their friends who were also college graduates, all but I think one an HBCU grad, was if you're going to do anything, it wasn't about becoming a sports figure. It was about doctor or lawyer, and then of course maybe teacher or or a nurse. Um, what did you hear from your parents and their peers about what you should be when you grew up?
I don't think my parents dreamed dreams for me. I think
Mm,
I had a set of parents that, what they did was I thought was special is they thought everything that I treated was special. They treated it as it was special. So I think the number one reason why I believe that in these things is because my parents just showed up, right? They were there. Like if I was in,
wow.
I grew up in orchestra, right? I grew up in orchestra, and when I was in orchestra, my parents was at the front row, just like they were at the basketball game. So I didn't feel that orchestra was not as important as basketball, right? Because they showed up for all the things. I was a mathlete. My mom was right there in the mathlete competition. You know what I'm saying? Like she left work. I'm gonna be there. Like woo! My boy doing a mathlete competition. So my parents are very supportive parents and very disciplinarians, but like very loving and open to the possibilities. I think that in some ways they allowed us to dream, but I also was a very focused kid. So I think it was easier for my mom to like just kind of like whatever I picked up, I was trying to be the best at. So they just knew if they supported there. And the other reason why I wanted to be the best, because if I was in the band, I had to be first chair. Because I'm gonna go back into my cousins and my brother, and I'll be second chair in the band, the third chair in the band. Like, nah, I won the sight reading competition, right? Like, and that plaque, right, was right there with the football trophy, right? It was no emphasis on like, in some ways it was a little bit shinier because it was like the thing that was like really cool. So I think that was the thing that my parents allowed me to do, was to be who I was. Like they never really tried to tell me to be anyone else besides myself. So
Hmm.
um,
But yet you are certainly aware that sometimes, particularly as it relates to sports and and black fathers, because they played ball in high school, whatever it was, but they didn't
mhm.
get beyond that,
Yeah.
and it becomes the dreams of their parents for their children. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And let me preface that with um my dad wrestled at Howard University. I
Mm.
wrestled in high school, and it stopped right there because I wasn't interested in that
Yeah,
anymore.
my dad played college football, right? My dad played college football. I To answer your question, I don't think that it's fair to dream dreams for your children. I think our job is more of like Professor X and X-Men, right? Like to
Mhm.
help them find out what their superpowers are and then start to enhance their ability to use these superpowers, right? Like give them all these different things to try, right? Like right now, the problem I have with a lot of parents is every kid is already a professional. So they're not developing a love for the craftsmanship or whatever it is. They're not falling in love with it. They just already trying to be a professional. They don't just play outside for the hell of it, right? They got a coach. Like every kid has a coach for 20, 10, 15 years. It's like, where do you just go out there and just discover who you are as a player? That's when you find your craftiness. That's when you find out how you play. And then the coach is supposed to enhance that. Where now we get in this thing where coaches trying to make players become a certain way because they feel like they have so much information on what a good player is. And I think, but as a parent, I think it's actually the opposite. It's to help your kid on their journey of self-discovery and introducing things as you see them do certain things. You might be like, you might like this. You should try theater. Sign up. Did you like theater? No, I don't like it. Okay. We tried it. You know what I'm saying? Then it's like, oh, you see them do something like, you want to try this? The thing with the children, they have to try. That's what we tell my daughter. If she goes, you have to be. If you're gonna go try out, you have to go out there and you have to stick it through until once you're done, you don't have to do it again next year if it wasn't a thing for you. But you have to Try. And there's never going to be a year where we don't give you an opportunity to try things. Because otherwise, how do we guide them through self-discovery? If I tell my daughter I just cover my daughter's room with dinosaurs when she's born, she'll grow up thinking that her favorite animal is a dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I litter her room with all types of animals, dolphins, dinosaurs, dogs, boom, 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 frogs, and then she would somehow make a choice of what she thinks her favorite animal is, right? I think is to give them the possibilities of choice, right? And not a paradox of choice.
When you first wrote the book, what was kind of the genesis? What was, and I remember, you spoke about the murder of Alton Sterling, but was that the thing specifically, or were you looking at life more broadly? That was the genesis of you kind of putting pen to paper.
No, it was that thing specifically. I wrote this while I was watching what was happening. And I'm one of the guys that, like, if something goes on, everyone calls me like, hey, you see this, what you're thinking? Like, okay, boom, boom. Like, we have a group discussion about it at the highest level, right? My brother, my dad, my friends, if they want to talk about these deeply things as men, my friends will call me for those conversations. But this is one of the times I didn't have an answer. Like, I didn't know what to say. And I started thinking about that. And it was like, I started thinking about, like, every time at this moment, it feels like when you look around and you see a black man, it's always at the worst possible situation when you want to see a black man. But the thing, when you look at black men and no matter what level of life or class of life you are at, that could actually be you. It don't matter how much money you make, if you're rich or you poor, if you're a black man, there's 1,000% of chance that could be you, right? And that's a very thing. When you think about it, like, man, I'm working this hard, do this, do that. The only person that you can speak to in that moment is not the black man, it's the black boy in every man, right? And I think that every black man is the black boy, and every black boy is the black man. I think we're one of the few collective of people where we have a shared experience that's passed through our DNA. The plight of the black man has been the same throughout our lifetime. The struggles, the constraints of society, the way it's built, the things that the black man has had to overcome has been consistent since the existence of the black man. And there's only one, it's very rare that there's a group of people in which in every generation, they have to go through these same traumas, right? So the thing is, how do we build a future? And we plant seeds in young black boys that what they believe is possible for the black man is different from what black men believe today for themselves.
I do want to talk to you about a narrative, and this is kind of piggybacking on something I said, earlier. And like you said, born in San Diego, but grew up in a big city. But there are for some black boys, sports or being an entertainer, more specifically a rapper, is their way out. And that's not a new thing. And I'm sure that you, while you were playing football, that there were guys who were able to make it out.
Right.
And God bless them, because they came from, obviously, in some cases, some very difficult circumstances. How do you change that narrative?
I don't disagree that sports is a possibility, right? My thought process is, and what I'm saying is, it's not the only possibility, right? How many more of us would make it out if you say of these circumstances that exist? How many more of us would make it out if we had 1,000 possible paths to follow? Now I can identify what the path that best suits me as black boy, right? Versus saying like, oh, this is a path, but like every black boy ain't no football player, right? Dang, it's not even like it. That's just ridiculous to even think, right? Like I see kids all the time, like, yeah, he ain't gonna make it. Enjoy it while you can, right? That's just what it is. Have fun, but this ain't the future for you. So it's like, what is your 10, right? And that's what I'm talking about, this discovery, right? It doesn't matter. My dad is from Amen, Louisiana. right? They got a population of like 2,500, right? My mom is from Franklinton. They got a population of maybe 4,200. You know what I'm saying? To me, my dad was the first explorer of our family.
Mm.
He left. He joined the Navy. He went to Germany. He went to here. He went to Virginia through the Navy. But he was the first one to see more of the world than anybody else in our family. He's the first explorer. He set the tone. I am about to be 38 in a month or two. I have seen more places than my father has, right? My brother has seen more places than I have. Our children are already at the space of seeing just as many places as my dad has. But if he don't set the tone, right, and we know that it's possible to see the world, now we go see more of the world because he empowered us through the things that he did, the road trip, whatever it was, how we could get somewhere, we got there. Then now it's like, oh, me and my daughter, she eating sushi at 4. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even know what it She knew sushi before she knew okra. You know what I'm saying? That's how it is for her, So it's just like, that's the amazing thing, right? If my dad doesn't leave, right, then it would have to be me or my brother that was first explorer. But since he decided to explore, we could go further. It's almost like Moana, right? Like, it's in a lot of ways, like, they go from one beach to another beach, and then the more boats you know how to sail, the more places you can go. Our thing is teaching them how to sail to all of the islands, right? Go get fruit wherever there's fruit for you. That's not saying that you can't play basketball or you shouldn't enjoy basketball. And that's not saying that you can't use basketball as the thing to get you to the other thing that you know to be true. You don't have to dream to go to the NBA. And your dream doesn't have to it can end with impact and not with riches, right? What are we living for? What do we want out of life? Who do we want to do? I think, how do you teach a young group of boys? And that's the problem with coaches that I have. They're raising athletes and not human beings, right? If we start to raise the children, if you take your kid to a team, that coach is in charge of developing his identity at such a young age. So you got to be careful who you allow to coach your coach, who you allow to coach your kids, because they are the ones that's really building the ethics and the moral, the code of standards for your children as men, first and foremost, not as athletes, because they all suck at 10 and 11 and 12 and 13. All of them are bad. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you may be fast, you may be able to do this, but they all suck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and who knows what's going to happen in the next 8 years of their life. So they're not professionals yet. Like, they are what they are. They play like 8th graders. They're really good for 8th graders. He's not already in position to be pro. So it's like, so when you talk about these coaches and these people that's raising these men in our community, if it's the sport, then it's the sports job to show them the possibilities. That's why AAU basketball was great, right? We was in Vegas, we was in North Carolina, we was the Bronx, like all these places. As a kid, we got there through our sport. We were seeing the world through the sport. But it's also, if a coach takes you to a town, it's his job to show you, hey, this is what's special in this town. Oh, let's go to the museum. How do you enrich their lives with more than just the sport that you get? They just be sitting in the hotel all day, right? Why not take them to the museums and take them to try new foods and take them to do these things while you are teach them how to, have dinner, or teach them what it's like to, to go to the museum and see this exhibition. Like, why are we not doing these things with our children if we're paying all this money for them to travel the world and play basketball?
Let me ask you about something else that happened over the course of this weekend. I'm sure you heard about it. The AJ Brown thing, where he was reading the book Inner Excellence during the game, without giving any context through the eyes of Martellus Bennett. What is your opinion of that?
To me, it's somebody that wants attention. As far as just the act of it during the game, you know what I'm saying? It's like, the game is, I'm so disengaged in this game that I ain't really got to pay attention because they ain't using me. That's what I see in the grand scheme of it. I mean, I think the funny thing is, socially, it's like the idea of a black man holding a book can impact the world and go viral in a way in which, you know, people question if he can read or if he's really reading. I mean, he didn't do himself no justice when they asked him what the book was about. He could he could give us the synopsis, but at the same time, so I think the act of reading, like, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but I wouldn't do that to my teammates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so now I'll tell you the reason I asked, because there are so many narratives, all of the ones that you just mentioned, and then there was the other one for those who don't necessarily follow sports, where I mean, even the morning anchors in Philadelphia, I think at the Fox affiliate, the sister and the guy that anchors with her, you know, they were wanting to figure out what was he reading, why was he reading, and they were, because the other argument is the intellectualization of of that, of that moment. And I don't have to necessarily tell you, there are also the narratives that we go all the way back to Dexter Manley with Washington, where he could not read, or Mike Tyson, where he said at one point he could not even read his contracts. And yet I don't think it's a stretch to, when we look at someone such as yourself, and some would argue that you are indeed a Renaissance man.
I like that title.
An athlete still. Just because you're no longer playing football doesn't mean that you're no longer an athlete.
I agree.
A writer, speaker, artist, bon vivant, all of those, like I said, there's nothing like a little HBCU education, but we can debate that whole thing. But with all of those things in the Martellus Bennett basket, even when you were playing, was this part of the kinds of things that you were sharing, with your teammates who did not have the blessing of your kind of life and exposure?
Yeah. Who I am right now is who I've always been. Information has been that's, some coaches didn't like the information that I shared with whether that was information I shared through my action towards things, or the way I spoke about things, or calling people out on things, or the fact that I was passing out information in other ways. So I think if the sharing of information, that's the best thing a human being could possibly do for a human being, and nothing has saved more lives than the sharing of information. And I do think there's this concept. I do think is, but the black kid reading is actually really a big thing. 75% of black boys aren't up to grade reading level by the 4th grade, right? Which is a crazy thing. Only 1% of black boys graduate high school above proficiency, right? So this idea of black boy reading is a huge thing, right? Like, it is this thing. But then when you think about, why aren't we reading? Why don't we read more? What are we doing? Again, it starts with how we raise our teams. If I'm coaching a team, there's book club as part of it, right? There's all these other aspects that you integrate into raising men of character and of structure, right? And teaching them to find things outside. And the books we're reading, we having discussions about that. That's just as important as the game plan at this age. I think that, but you also got to think about this idea of language, right? If you think about, for black boys, when they read books, it's a new language. It doesn't sound like home, right? It doesn't sound like my household. It doesn't sound like my neighborhood, right? And you got to think about that. What we have to write in the way that is right by colonialism. We don't get to write in our own tongue, because the editor will edit you with colonialism. Right. So the key is, we need more black writers, right? We need more black men writing books, right? Expressing themselves in many. And that's why I like guys like Jason Reynolds and people like that, who are writing books for young black boys and black kids in their tongue, right? Like how he talks in a regular conversation. And when you read that book, it feels a little bit easier to read at that age, right? And now you see yourself on all these different adventures. You see yourself in these stories. I want to read stories with characters who look like me. I don't want to be going on white adventures my entire life, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, Harry Potter is great, but every once in a while, I want to go jump in some other stuff, that's really cool. So I think that, and going back to AJ reading, I think it's a beautiful thing that, to see a black man with a book on national television is not something that the world often sees.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's especially a strong black man, right? Muscles, braids, dark skin, what I'm saying, at the top physical man you could possibly see, walking with a book. That's actually quite frightening. Are all of them doing this? Do all of them read? Well, we gotta start rethinking some things around here. If we giving them scholarships, they working out and they not only physically phenomenal, they're mentally phenomenal. Like we got to start a different business, right? We got to do something totally different if this is the type of man we're getting out of this business plan, right? So you think about those things, but the more times we see that, I have lots of friends that in the NFL that read books, right? And things like that. So it's not like this thing of, again, it goes to this fact that he's a human, right? Like we read too. Like I took my own test, so.
I'm glad to hear that.
My wife be laughing because I'm in this group chat with a couple of homies that played in the NFL, and it's kind of funny because my brother lives in Hawaii on top of this mountain, right? So some morning he'll send in a group chat. He'll be like, "Oh, just eating duck eggs on the top of the mountain, the sunset behind him." Right. And I got his other homeboy, he had just got a Ferrari, right? He was like, oh, he showed a picture of himself waxing the rims of his Ferrari, like life is great. Just about to take the baby out for a spin. You know what I'm saying? The other homeboy, he come in, he's like, oh yeah, it's kind of early, but he sent a picture of his watch in the group chat. So then I'm like, oh man, this is kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? Then I'm looking around, I'm like, what do I have? I have bookshelf wealth. So I go to the bookshelf and I'm like, yeah, this is a first edition. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory right here. And it was like only you would put a first edition book in there, you know what I'm saying? So it's like it was like this moment of funny because it's like that is luxury to me, right? Bookshelf wealth is luxury to me. But the thing is like what do you get from that luxury? And I tell my sister, don't ever date a man who don't have a book collection. Can he, you know what I'm saying? Like
that's a whole show right there. That's a whole, like I said, that's a whole show right there.
Yeah, like what book, like your bookshelf wealth, brother. Let me see what you reading right now. Yeah,
exactly.
I've asked my boys what they're reading right now. They're gonna say, "Hey man, I just finished up this book," and another one gonna say, "I just finished." All of my friends are reading. I actually don't know if I can hang out with somebody who doesn't read.
We've spoken about your message to Black boys, but what is your message to Black parents?
That's very interesting. I think that there's a message to Black parents, but I also think there's this message to Black community, right? Like I think this idea of that we're all in charge of, how we shape the future of our community, right? We're one of the few people who can actually, dictate that. And it's been proven in the past, like we are futurists. But I think as Black parents, what I would say is that introduction, right? Introduce your kids to, even if it's weird to you, learn with them, right? Don't be afraid to learn a new thing because it's their interest, right? Like go through the process with them, learning with them, be there for them, introduce all these possibilities and open up yourself so that they can open up more, right? I can't, you got to think about, we tell kids to read, but then you have households who don't have books or parents who don't read in the household, right? We mimic this behavior, right? So it's like, how do we, the conversations in which we have and what are we talking to our children about? So just being that Professor X in their life to help them find their superpowers and help them develop their superpowers so they could be the superheroes that they are. And then I think as a community, I think it's about accepting all of the geniuses, right? Like in magnifying and amplifying all of the genius that our community represents. Like, I think it's crazy when we have to find out about our history through someone else. Like I find out, like say, that there's like a lot of kids don't know what Booker T. Washington did. Right. They know Martin Luther King, they'll talk about Rosa Parks, and they might know a little bit about Malcolm X. but no one's teaching about the former slave who built his own college, right? You know what I'm saying? Or Lonnie Johnson, or Jerry Lawson in the video game space and the toy space. And it's like, oh, I'm already like, you know, I would say this. When I was a kid, Willy Wonka was a big inspiration of mine, right? I like that. I didn't want to go to the chocolate factory. I want to own my own chocolate factory. I like the idea of having this place where all your ideas could come to life and you could make anything you want, and it was really cool and colorful. But then recently, the movie Jingle Jangle came out.
Oh yeah, David's movie. Yeah.
That movie changed everything, right? Willy Wonka has no longer been a reference of mine. Jeronicus Jangle, now that's me.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't got to imagine the child. He got it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm trying to do right now. You know what I'm saying? I can look at him. My car name is Jeronicus. You know what I'm saying? So like, you see that moment, like, how can we create more of those moments, right? How many other kids gonna see Jeronicus Jangle and be like, oh, you know what? I want to be a toy maker. And then you can show them the real actual toy makers across their geniuses, across their ancestry's past, right? Like, you could go back and like, he made toys. Then you go Granville T. Woods doing roller coasters. Then you go, you know what I'm saying? So then it's like, wow, I'm not the first.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I got to tell you, this is just a jab. David Talbert went to my alma mater, Morgan State University.
Okay.
The director of Jingle Jangle, and good people. Definitely good people. Wonderful, wonderful, creative brother. But please continue. I've got another minute or so left. I'll let you make a final point about your book and how you hope this will help Black boys find their place in the world, even if they don't have the kind of wonderful parental support that you and so many other people have.
Yeah, I really, like, I can't stress it enough that, like, you know, books are windows to the world, right? And, you know, there's this really wonderful thing that people do not know how to use very well, in which we call the internet, right? And I think that, like, you know, actually learning how to use the internet in a way that's productive to growing who you are and seeing what you want to see is like this really wonderful thing. So I think about it like, you know, don't lose your curiosity, and where you're from does not limit where you can go. I think those would be the last words I would have to share.
That's a word. Martellus Bennett, thank you so very, very much for spending some time with us and talking not only about the book Dear Black Boy, but about yourself. Certainly you and your life are a continuing inspiration to all of us, even those of us who were Black boys once and are Black men now. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That was nice. That was great.
That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. I'm Harold Fisher.